Ferrari needs to react after the disappointing Australian Grand Prix, and the Italian side believes it knows how. The first back-to-back race weekends of the F1 World Championship come as early as the second round of the 2025 Formula One season, scheduled at the 5.451-kilometer Shanghai International Circuit. The track, located in the Chinese megacity, will host the first of 6 sprint weekends of the season, at a stage of the championship where teams have yet to gain in-depth knowledge of their respective technical projects. The 3 days of collective preseason testing at the Bahrain circuit in Sakhir and the first Grand Prix of the season, held on an atypical track and in rather adverse weather conditions, have made analyzing the behavior of the cars even more complicated. Needless to say, at the moment, the only certainty is the McLaren MCL39, which, as predicted, has shown enormous potential. The doubts related to the different work programs carried out by the Formula One teams up until last Saturday's third free practice session have given way to unequivocal displays of strength, both in qualifying and race pace, in any weather condition. This is why the Chinese Grand Prix will be an important test for everyone, especially for Ferrari, which endured a truly disastrous weekend at the Albert Park circuit in Melbourne. While it is true that the F1 team led by Andrea Stella starts as the favorite even for the first Asian round of the season, the history of the much-debated sprint format shows that the compressed weekend schedule can reward not only the most competitive car, but also the team that manages to establish the best baseline setup through simulator work at their respective factories. Moreover, the ability to make changes to the car after Saturday's sprint race serves as a kind of makeup test for teams that did not start the weekend on the right foot. It is clear that over the course of the weekend, the best cars will dominate the top positions. Like it or not, this format was designed precisely to minimize the sessions that teams dedicate to what is known in technical jargon as fine-tuning. Scuderia Ferrari arrives at the second round of the season with many questions. The positive aspect is that the Shanghai International Circuit will provide much more indicative feedback compared to what was gathered in the Australian Grand Prix. If corrective updates are needed, it will be essential to collect data on tracks that, due to their geometry, highlight any aeromechanical deficiencies of the car. Sure, the Chinese F1 track is not on the same level as Suzuka, the third round of the Formula One Championship, but it does feature very challenging sections, such as the corkscrew right after the main straight, characterized by variable radius corners with 2 apexes, also on a negative camber. This is a sector where the thermal capacity of the tires will play a crucial role. The sprint race will therefore be a functional test for Sunday's race. Red Bull showed last year in Qatar how a sprint weekend can be an opportunity when the weekend does not start in the best way. Max Verstappen, despite his dislike for this sprint format, has won 11 out of 18 races over the 100-kilometer distance, which is a statistic that represents over 61% of the events held so far. At this point, it is worth recalling an interesting fact that supports this reasoning. In the 2024 edition of the Qatar Grand Prix, during the only free practice session, the RB20 single-seater did not go beyond the 11th fastest time with Max Verstappen and even the 18th with Sergio Perez. At that point, the engineers of the Austrian team gave a new meaning to the shootout qualifying and the sprint race. They disregarded the Saturday result, using it solely as an additional test session. Once the Saturday mini-race was over, Christian Horner's team completely overhauled the RB20, which, thanks also to the skill of the 4-time Dutch F1 world champion, dominated the 300-kilometer race in a rather surprising manner. All of this, ladies and gentlemen, in defiance of predictions that had heavily favored the McLaren MCL38 for Sunday's race. The hope is that the Chinese weekend will prove that what happened in Australia was just a setback in Ferrari's season. However, if that is not the case, why not approach the first sprint weekend of the season the way the Milton Keynes team did last year in Losail? At the very least, it would allow for more time to find a compromise setup capable of minimizing the current weaknesses of the Ferrari SF-25 car. The Chinese Grand Prix will therefore be a moment of truth, serving as a test for some of the most crucial design qualities and raising the question of whether anyone can challenge McLaren until the end of the year. Ferrari is eager to assess its actual gap from the world champions, convinced that the deficit seen in Australia does not accurately reflect the competitive landscape. The Shanghai round already stands as a key turning point in a weekend further influenced by the sprint format. The Chinese circuit is one of the most telling indicators of title aspirations. It has rightly been said that the highly varied calendar leads to a constant evolution in the competitive hierarchy from race to race, depending on track characteristics. However, Shanghai is among the circuits that most resemble European racetracks, or others like Suzuka and Qatar, which make up a significant portion of the season. China features several high and medium-speed corners, but pure aerodynamic load takes a back seat, with a maximum lateral acceleration of 4.6 g, lower than Melbourne's 4.9 g. What stands out instead is the length of Shanghai's sweeping corners. In the 7, 8, 9, 10 sequence, drivers remain on a steered racing line for up to 4 seconds after each direction change, requiring great stability through the corners, one of the hardest qualities to develop. The most indicative section in this regard is the opening corkscrew, where entry speeds approach 300 km per hour before an 8-second right-hand turn, progressively increasing the steering angle while reducing speed below 100 km per hour. This is what teams call a yaw sweep, a complete test of the car's performance at various yaw angles, which refers to the car's rotation relative to its direction of travel. Shanghai will reveal a lot about the title-contending qualities of the cars, starting with Ferrari, which has been working on improving cornering stability since late 2024. Charles Leclerc also pointed out that Shanghai is a real track, but unfortunately they struggled a lot there last year as well. Any difficulties encountered here would not be an isolated case. If the Chinese track proves challenging for the SF-25 or other cars, similar struggles could arise at many other races. While drivers were at full throttle for 78% of the lap in Melbourne, in China, that figure drops to just 55%, with average qualifying speeds around 210 km per hour, compared to 250 km per hour in Australia. These numbers highlight the slower and less flowing nature of the Shanghai track, necessitating medium downforce setups slightly higher than those used in the season opener. Shanghai is also a key test of balance, as its high-speed corners contrast with sections demanding strong mechanical grip, such as turns 3, 6, 11, and 14, where good traction is essential. The presence of several hairpins shifts focus to braking, particularly at turn 14, where deceleration reaches 4.7 g as speeds drop from 320 to 70 km per hour. Brembo rates the track's braking severity as 3 out of 5 and notes that brakes will be used for 18% of the lap time, compared to just 11% in Australia. Brake efficiency will be crucial, particularly for McLaren. Lando Norris has voiced frustration over the MCL39's lack of responsiveness on corner entry, making it harder to attack the apex, a significant challenge in the opening corkscrew, where braking is constantly combined with increasing steering input to the right. The changes from Australia go beyond just track layout. Shanghai's track surface differs in abrasiveness, adhesive grip, and mechanical grip. The biggest uncertainty will be understanding how the surface interacts with harder tires compared to Australia, as Pirelli is supplying its intermediate compounds, C2, C3, and C4. Tire pressures have increased from last year, now set at 26.5 psi for the front and 23.0 psi for the rear, 1 psi higher than in Australia. The relatively easy overtaking opportunities shift the focus toward race management rather than single-lap pace, with braking and lateral forces making the front axle the limiting factor for race performance.